It was the middle of the night in Gresham, Oregon. Inside a small ground floor apartment, silence suddenly gave way to chaos. Neighbors would later recall hearing screams, crashes, and desperate cries that echoed through the walls. Yet no one called for help. Hours later, officers arrived to a scene so violent it would leave even the most experienced detectives shaken. Nothing was stolen. There was no forced entry in the way one might expect. Instead, every detail pointed to something far more personal, something terrifying. And at the center of it all was a young mother, fighting for her life until the very end. If you're a fan of true crime and criminal investigations, you won't want to miss our new book, The Ultimate Book of Serial Killers: 180 Files of the World's Most Notorious Murderers, now available on Amazon. You can also purchase the PDF version directly from our website for instant download. You'll find the link in the video description and in a pinned comment. Now, let's dive into today's case. Anastasia Hester, known to everyone as Annie, had spent her entire life in Gresham, Oregon. Her childhood was marked by hardship. Her father died when she was still a teenager, leaving her to lean on her mother and stepfather for support. Through those years of loss and rebuilding, Annie stayed deeply connected to her family, never losing her sense of resilience. People who knew Annie described her as dependable and strong-willed, someone who never hesitated to step up when needed. She was hardworking and had a natural talent for leadership, traits that carried into every part of her life. Yet what truly lit her up was her passion for games. Role-playing adventures and cosplay festivals gave her joy, and she was often spotted in local game shops around town. It was in that world of shared interests that she reconnected with Matthew Hester. The two had first met years earlier, back in 1999, when Matt was married to someone else. Life carried them in different directions, but fate, or what they believed was fate, brought them back together at a local game store. By that time, Matt was divorced, and this chance encounter soon turned into a new relationship. In 2008, Annie and Matt were married. A few years later, in 2011, their daughter Alice was born, bringing new light into Annie's world. But happiness in their home didn't last. Just 1 year after Alice's birth, Annie faced betrayal. Matt repeated the same mistake that had ended his first marriage: infidelity. Annie tried to forgive, but the foundation of trust was gone. With more lies and broken promises, she knew she had to make a painful decision. She filed for divorce and began life anew as a single mother. The change was not easy. Annie and Alice moved into a modest one-bedroom apartment. Annie gave her daughter the privacy of the only bedroom, while she herself slept on a mattress in the living room. Despite the exhaustion that weighed on her, Annie never slowed down. By day, she worked in an after-school program caring for children, and in the evenings, she clocked into a downtown call center. Her dedication was noticed, and over time she earned a managerial position, though the hours were long and draining. Matt's child support was unreliable. He often changed jobs, leaving Annie to shoulder the financial burden on her own. But Annie never gave up. Every ounce of energy was spent ensuring Alice had what she needed. Even after Matt remarried, this time to a woman named Angela, Annie kept things civil. The two families even shared dinners or outings for Alice's sake. Annie never lost her creativity or her love for the small things. At Christmas, she crafted handmade decorations for loved ones and designed personalized cards with photos of Alice. On weekends when Alice stayed with her father, Annie used the time to take on side jobs, often painting faces at local events. For her, staying busy meant both survival and expression. She carried everything on her own shoulders with quiet strength. But in the summer of 2016, that strength was met with unimaginable violence. On a quiet night in Gresham, officers were called to Annie's apartment. Inside, they uncovered a crime so brutal it stunned even seasoned investigators. Annie's ground floor unit showed signs of forced entry, not through the door, but through Alice's bedroom window. The window-mounted air conditioner had been torn out, and a block had been used to push it open. When police entered, the front door was unlocked. Inside, the apartment was strangely undisturbed. Nothing was stolen, nothing ransacked, suggesting robbery was never the motive. Blood patterns told a horrifying story. Annie had likely been asleep when the killer struck. She tried to escape, running toward the front door but never made it out. She endured a vicious attack, over 60 stab wounds, many to her chest and head. The violence was so extreme that her killer even attempted to decapitate her. On her shoulder, carved into her flesh, were 3 letters, VXV. No one could explain what they meant. Was it a message, a symbol, or simply a cruel distraction left behind by a twisted mind? At the scene, 3 knives lay on the carpet, some taken from Annie's own kitchen block, and 1 folding knife that appeared to have been carried in by the attacker. Bloody shoe prints marked the floor, leading toward the exit. Detectives were left to wonder, was there only one killer or more than one? Fortunately, Alice was safe. That night, she had been staying with her father and Angela. Had she been home, she might have become a second victim. Neighbors reported haunting details. Some heard screams and crashing noises around 11:15 p.m. Others described loud arguments, slamming doors, even groaning sounds that went on past 1 a.m. One neighbor admitted they had turned up the television just to drown out the chaos. And yet, no one called for help. Only one person actually reached for the phone and called for help. That person was the victim herself, Annie. At 3 a.m., gasping for breath and barely able to speak, she managed to dial 911. It was the final act of desperation from a woman fighting for her life. From the first noises neighbors reported hearing around 11 p.m. until the moment Annie placed that call, nearly 4 hours had passed. For investigators, that detail was chilling. It suggested the assault was not brief. It was prolonged, cruel, and amounted to torture. Detectives were left searching for answers. They had no suspect, no clear motive, and no explanation for the strange VXV carved into Annie's body. The only thing they knew for certain was that someone had wanted her dead and had gone to extraordinary lengths to make it happen. Naturally, attention first turned to the people closest to her. Police contacted Annie's ex-husband, Matt Hester, and his current wife, Angela. They were informed of Annie's death and asked to come to the station. Investigators needed to know if there had been any tension, threats, or disputes. Matt insisted he didn't know of any enemies Annie might have had. He said their relationship was manageable, if distant, and that his only real concern was the well-being of their daughter, Alice. Matt told investigators he and Angela had been home all night with Alice and Angela's 3 children. They had spent the evening playing video games, then went to bed around 10 p.m. According to him, Angela was beside him the entire time, and she confirmed the story. She added that she was a light sleeper, and if Matt had left during the night, she would have noticed. Still, detectives couldn't ignore Matt's demeanor. He didn't seem especially shaken by the violent death of his ex-wife. His focus remained on custody arrangements and Alice's future. He described his feelings toward Annie as mostly indifferent, saying he wanted as little to do with her as possible. He admitted he had cheated during their marriage, but claimed they had an open relationship. According to him, Annie had also explored polyamorous relationships, including one with a couple she met at a pirate-themed role-playing event. Investigators quickly tracked that couple down, but they were cleared of any involvement. Physically, Matt also presented complications for investigators. He walked with a cane, struggled with a limp, and was clearly dealing with health issues. Considering the ferocity of the crime scene, the sheer force of more than 60 stab wounds, detectives questioned whether someone in his condition could have committed such an attack alone. Angela was also interviewed, repeating the same story. They had both been in bed by 10 p.m., scrolling on their phones until they fell asleep. Their household was chaotic. 4 children, a dog, and even tenants renting out parts of the property, including the garage. Angela's close friend Karina was staying in that garage and told police she was certain Matt and Angela had been home all night. She said if a car had left the driveway, she would have heard it immediately. Both Matt and Angela surrendered their phones voluntarily, and nothing incriminating surfaced at that point. With no solid evidence, they were released. Meanwhile, the search for answers stretched into the surrounding area. Detectives brought in search and rescue teams, who combed through the brush along the Springwater Trail with dogs and helicopters. The trail was notorious for transient activity and drug use, and residents of the neighborhood voiced their fears. Many believed Annie may have crossed paths with a dangerous drifter, but the deeper investigators looked into Annie's life and her custody battle with Matt, the less that theory seemed to fit. The idea of peaceful co-parenting was unraveling. Everything had changed when Angela entered Matt's life. What began as her simply renting a room quickly turned into a relationship, and from that point, tensions with Annie only escalated. Angela reportedly didn't want Matt communicating with Annie, and Matt himself became more insistent on having Alice full-time. Their struggle ended up in court. Just a month before Annie's murder, the ruling came down. Full custody of Alice was awarded to Annie. On top of that, Matt was ordered to pay more than $13,000 in back child support, plus nearly $30,000 in legal fees. The reality was stark. Neither Matt nor Angela was employed. The financial and personal strain was immense, and Annie had won. For detectives, one pressing question remained. How were Matt and Angela supposed to pay? Matt spent most of his time at home, pouring his energy into fantasy writing and the creation of elaborate role-playing games. He even managed a YouTube channel alongside Angela, where he shared his fictional worlds with a small online audience. But when it came to the reality of the thousands of dollars owed to Annie, back child support, and court-ordered fees, Matt and Angela had no income to fall back on. Their explanation was that they were full-time caregivers. They claimed their children struggled with mental health issues, and because of that, they received government benefits and financial assistance. Angela's ex-husband, Aaron, told investigators that this very obsession with diagnosing and medicating children had ended their marriage. He said Angela constantly believed her kids needed prescription drugs, even when doctors disagreed. To him, it was dangerous and unnecessary. Aaron also revealed that Angela's focus eventually shifted to Alice, Annie's daughter. She became convinced that Alice was bipolar, a claim Annie strongly denied. Annie grew fearful that Angela was attempting to use Alice's name and condition as a way to gain additional benefits. Experts later confirmed Annie was right to worry. A licensed psychologist explained that labeling normal developmental behavior as mental illness was harmful, and official diagnostic standards for bipolar disorder didn't even exist for children under 6. The conflict escalated further when Child Protective Services received a report accusing Annie of neglect. Annie didn't know who had made the call, but she was devastated. Though the case was quickly dismissed and deemed unfounded, the emotional toll weighed heavily on her. In an email to a friend, she wrote in anguish, "I just don't understand. What did I do to deserve all of this?" For investigators, motive was becoming clearer by the day. Custody, jealousy, and money, 3 powerful reasons for Matt and Angela to want Annie gone. But motive alone wasn't enough. They still lacked the evidence needed to prove involvement. The detectives brought the couple back in for further questioning. Matt surprised investigators by voluntarily removing his shirt, showing no cuts or scratches. In a case where the victim had fought desperately for her life, detectives believed the killer would almost certainly have injuries. Yet Matt insisted he had nothing to hide. He acknowledged that people might assume the ex-husband was responsible, but denied having anything to do with Annie's death. Angela, for her part, said little during questioning. She kept her head down, complaining she wasn't feeling well. But then, she introduced new details that contradicted her original statement. She admitted that at around 3 a.m. on the night of the murder, she had actually been awake. According to her, she had taken the dogs outside, then suddenly became violently ill, so ill that Matt had to help her shower and change clothes. This new account placed both of them awake and moving at the very hour Annie called 911. Still, without hard evidence, detectives were forced to release them again. But this time, they launched covert surveillance. What they found was alarming. Footage showed Matt moving around with no difficulty, carrying heavy shopping bags, doing yard work, and walking without a cane. The frailty he had displayed in the interrogation room now looked like an act. Even more damning, a neighbor's security camera captured a vehicle leaving Matt and Angela's driveway just before 1 a.m. and heading in the direction of Annie's apartment. Their housemate Karina, who was sleeping in the garage, had told police she was certain she hadn't heard anything. But now, detectives questioned whether she was protecting her friends. The contradictions piled up. Matt and Angela had lied, and the facade of innocence was quickly unraveling. By the 1-year mark, Annie's family was still waiting for answers. The brutal nature of her murder made it impossible to accept silence. A reward was offered for any information that could finally bring justice. But as the months passed, the case remained unsolved, and the killer of Annie was still at large. The pain Annie's family endured was indescribable. Her mother later said she would never want another parent to experience what they had. The grief, the unanswered questions, and the silence from Annie's absence left wounds that could not be healed. Public appeals followed. Police urged anyone with information to come forward, emphasizing that whoever had done this needed to be found. For Annie's family, there could be no peace without justice. Meanwhile, Matt and Angela had quietly relocated nearly 700 miles away, making cooperation with the investigation more difficult. But detectives pressed on. They were patient, knowing that forensic science might uncover what human testimony could not. Then came the breakthrough. DNA tests were completed on the knives collected from the crime scene. The results were undeniable. The blood and DNA matched Angela. In October 2017, over a year after Annie's murder, police tracked Angela to Pocatello, Idaho. There, she was arrested on 2 counts of aggravated murder and 1 count of first-degree theft. As she was taken into custody, Angela erupted in anger, shouting that she had children at home and demanding answers. Despite her protests, detectives stood firm. She was now charged with intentionally killing Annie, and prosecutors added another count, alleging deliberate acts of torture. If convicted, Angela faced life in prison, and at that time, possibly even the death penalty. But she pleaded not guilty, maintaining her innocence despite the mounting evidence. Detectives turned again to Matt. They showed him photos from Annie's autopsy, hoping to break through his indifference. At first, Matt continued to deny involvement, but then he admitted that Angela had come home the night of the murder covered in blood. He claimed she was panicking, and all he did was help her clean up. He insisted he had no idea what she had done, though he also admitted that he and Angela had often talked about killing Annie in the past. Still, Matt tried to deflect suspicion onto others. This time, Angela's ex-husband Aaron. Detectives interrogated Aaron thoroughly, but found no evidence linking him to the crime. He was never charged. Court records revealed the gruesome details of what Angela was accused of doing, stabbing Annie more than 60 times, attempting to decapitate her, and carving the letters VXV into her skin. It was a crime defined by rage and cruelty. The most damning evidence came from a Google Maps search. Just 3 days after the murder, Angela had looked up a location in Mount Hood National Forest. Detectives followed the trail and discovered a boot buried beside a tree. It matched the bloody shoe print found at the crime scene. A diver later recovered a plastic bag nearby, containing Angela's clothing. The tread pattern, size, and purchase records all tied directly back to her. The evidence was overwhelming. As the investigation deepened, another disturbing detail surfaced. Annie had a $100,000 life insurance policy. Her parents were the beneficiaries. Yet shortly after her death, a call came into the insurance company, not from them, but from Matt. He casually inquired whether he or Alice might be eligible for a payout. When told no information could be given, he hung up without another word. By 2019, prosecutors had built their case further. Matt was charged with 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, 1 count of solicitation to commit murder, and 1 count of hindering prosecution. Like Angela, he pleaded not guilty. But the weight of evidence became impossible to ignore. In 2020, Angela changed her plea. She admitted to second-degree murder. While a change in Oregon law meant she no longer faced the death penalty, she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Matt's fate came later. In 2021, he pleaded guilty to soliciting Angela's brother to commit murder, as well as hindering prosecution. His sentence was light compared to the gravity of the crime, just 56 months in prison, less than 5 years. Many saw it as a controversial decision, but prosecutors believed it was strategic. If stronger evidence against Matt emerged in the future, they wanted to preserve the option of charging him again with conspiracy to murder. An acquittal would have made that impossible. Angela and Matt divorced while behind bars. Angela has never spoken publicly about Annie since her arrest. When asked by visitors, she only says, "That's between me and God." Angela's children entered foster care, while Alice was adopted by Annie's mother. In the end, Alice found safety and love within the family Annie had always wanted to protect her. Those who worked with Annie remembered her as more than a victim. She was a source of inspiration, someone who worked tirelessly, carried heavy burdens, and still managed to create joy for others. Her positivity, even in the darkest of times, left a lasting impression on everyone who knew her. And even in her final moments, Annie showed what she had always embodied: strength, resilience, and a fierce determination to fight. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. It was Christmas Eve in Carnation, Washington. Inside the Anderson family home, the air was warm with the scent of pine and wrapping paper scattered across the table. Outside, the winter sky was fading, and the quiet country property sat tucked away behind a locked gate. By nightfall, the scene inside had changed. The tree still stood, lights glowing softly, but the living room told another story. The phone line had gone dead. Footsteps had stopped, and in the silence, the fate of 3 generations was sealed before anyone could call for help. What happened that night would leave a small community in shock and reveal a chain of events driven by resentment, betrayal, and something far darker. If you're a fan of true crime and criminal investigations, you won't want to miss our new book, The Ultimate Book of Serial Killers, 180 Files of the World's Most Notorious Murderers, now available on Amazon. You can also purchase the PDF version directly from our website for instant download. You'll find the link in the video description and in a pinned comment. Now, let's dive into today's case. Wayne Anderson, age 60, was a respected Boeing engineer who had built not only a long career but also a solid, loving marriage with his wife, Judy Anderson. Judy, 61, worked for the United States Postal Service and was equally admired in their close-knit community of Carnation, Washington. For 31 years, the couple had shared a life together, raising 3 children, Mary, Scott, and Michelle. Mary, their eldest daughter, lived quietly in North Bend. Their middle child, 32-year-old Scott Anderson, was married to 31-year-old Erica Mantle Anderson. The young couple were devoted parents to 2 children, Olivia, age 5, and Nathan, age 3. Living in Black Diamond, about 25 minutes from Wayne and Judy, Scott worked long hours in construction to provide for his family, while Erica dedicated herself to caring for the children full-time. The youngest of the Anderson children, 29-year-old Michelle Kristen Anderson, was a very different personality. She lived with her boyfriend, 29-year-old Joseph Thomas McEnroe, in Falls City. The two had first met in an online fantasy fiction chat room, quickly forming a bond that led them to move in together in 2004. Renting a mobile home, Michelle listed her job on the application as a night security guard for Nintendo, while Joseph stated he was employed at Target. Neighbors remembered the couple as strange and difficult to approach. Some noted they would avoid eye contact and react with hostility to the smallest perceived offenses, such as a car parking in their spot or a neighbor's pet straying into their yard. Michelle often called herself the black sheep of the family. She told others her relationship with her parents was volatile, claiming her father had hit her and that her mother was cold and unkind. Judy, however, worried about Michelle's life choices and regularly confided in her best friend, Linda, about her concerns. Judy made monthly trips to Michelle's home, always bringing food and necessities. Michelle claimed she had no desire to live on her parents' property, yet by 2007, she and Joseph had done exactly that, moving into a trailer on Wayne and Judy's land, rent-free. By Christmas Eve of 2007, tensions within the family remained largely unseen to outsiders. Wayne and Judy were hosting the holiday gathering at their Carnation home. Scott, Erica, and the children planned to arrive in the evening to share the festivities. But before the celebration could begin, Michelle and Joseph, already on the property, entered the main house around 4 p.m. One carried a revolver, the other, a handgun. Inside, Judy was busy wrapping presents in a back room. Joseph distracted her while Michelle confronted her father. Her attempt to shoot him failed. Whether due to a misfire or a missed shot remains uncertain. Joseph stepped in, raising his weapon and firing a fatal shot to Wayne's head. Michelle and Joseph then turned their attention to Judy, shooting her 3 times. The couple dragged both bodies to a shed behind the house, attempting to hide the evidence by covering blood with towels and rugs. Roughly an hour later, Scott, Erica, and the children arrived, unaware of the horror that had unfolded. They entered the living room, settling on the couch, when Michelle suddenly opened fire on her brother. Multiple rounds struck Scott, killing him where he sat. Erica was shot soon after, wounded but alive long enough to grab the cordless phone. At 5:13 p.m., she managed to dial 911 despite being hit 3 times, her children just feet away as the nightmare continued. Joseph McEnroe snatched the phone from Erica's hands, yanking out the batteries before hurling it violently against the wall. The sudden silence ended the desperate 911 call mid-sentence. Erica's pleas for mercy filled the room, but Joseph raised his weapon and fired a single fatal shot to her head. She collapsed instantly. The chaos did not end there. Joseph turned his attention to the children. 5-year-old Olivia was shot first, her life taken in an instant. Just moments later, 3-year-old Nathan, still small enough to believe in kindness, picked up the fallen phone batteries from the floor. In an innocent gesture, he reached out to hand them back to Joseph. Without hesitation, Joseph leveled the gun at the boy. Nathan was still clinging to his mother's chest when the shot rang out, killing him instantly. The 911 call Erica had made moments earlier had triggered a response from local deputies. At 5:45 p.m., law enforcement arrived at the Anderson property to investigate. Michelle, anticipating that the police might come, had already taken steps to keep them out. She locked the front gate at the end of the long driveway, blocking vehicle access. Without making any effort to enter the property or check on the occupants, the responding officers turned away, completely unaware of the massacre that had just taken place inside. 2 days later, on December 26, 2007, Judy Anderson failed to appear for her shift at the United States Post Office in Carnation. Her longtime friend and co-worker Linda called her home, but there was no answer. Alarmed, Linda decided to drive to the Anderson residence to check on her. When she arrived, she found the property's gate locked, just as the police had 2 days earlier. Unlike the deputies, Linda walked around the barrier, determined to reach the house. The front door was shut and she knocked repeatedly, calling out Judy's name. Receiving no response, she tried the door and was startled to find it unlocked. An unusual detail, as Judy was known to always keep her home secured. Pushing the door open, Linda stepped inside and called again. "Judy, it's Linda. We're worried about you." Silence filled the air. Then, looking down, she saw the body of a man lying motionless on the floor. At first, she thought perhaps he was unconscious from carbon monoxide poisoning and instinctively prepared to drag him outside. But as she stepped closer, horror gripped her. He had been shot in the head. As her eyes adjusted, Linda saw more victims lying nearby. Realizing the enormity of the situation, she rushed to call 911, her voice breaking as she reported, "There's been a murder. There are 3 people dead that I can see right now. There's a baby, and a man, and a woman, and she's my best friend." By 9:30 a.m., King County Sheriff's deputies had arrived. Inside the house, they found the bodies of Scott Anderson, his wife Erica, and their 2 children. Nathan was still pressed against his mother's chest, as if seeking safety in death, while Olivia lay beneath her mother's body. All 4 had been executed with gunshots to the head. A search of the property led investigators to a shed behind the house, where they discovered 2 more victims, Wayne and Judy Anderson. Like the others, both had been shot. Hours later, at approximately 11 a.m., Michelle Anderson and Joseph McEnroe drove up to the crime scene. Detectives immediately noticed their unusual demeanor. Michelle introduced herself as Wayne and Judy's daughter, explaining that she lived in a trailer on the property. Neither she nor Joseph asked what had happened, why law enforcement was present in such numbers, or whether her family was safe. This lack of concern, amid yellow crime scene tape, a line of police vehicles, and a mobile command center, stood out sharply to investigators. Sensing that the pair were withholding information, detectives separated Michelle and Joseph for questioning. Both gave a strange explanation for their whereabouts on Christmas Eve, claiming they had set out to drive to Las Vegas to get married, but had gotten lost and decided to return home instead. In their initial account, Michelle Anderson and Joseph McEnroe claimed that on the morning of Christmas Eve, they had gone to Michelle's parents, Wayne and Judy Anderson, to share happy news. They were planning to get married. They said Wayne and Judy had been delighted for them. But when investigators revisited their statements, the cracks in the story quickly appeared. Under pressure, both Michelle and Joseph admitted that this version of events was a fabrication they had agreed upon beforehand. Michelle's composure shattered. In a sudden outburst, she exclaimed, "What the hell have I done? I'm a monster." After waiving their constitutional rights, the pair gave full and lengthy confessions, admitting to the murders of all 6 members of the Anderson family. Michelle even took detectives to the location where she and Joseph had discarded one of the 2 firearms used in the killings. During her interrogation, Michelle made it clear that much of her anger had been directed toward her brother, Scott Anderson. She described how their relationship had once been close, but had deteriorated after he married Erica. She alleged that Scott owed her a significant sum of money, approximately $40,000, stemming from what she claimed were multiple loans given to him over the years, the most recent several years prior. Michelle expressed resentment toward her parents as well, claiming they refused to support her in the dispute with Scott. She believed they favored him and felt they had repeatedly slighted and mistreated her. Adding to her grievances was her anger over Wayne and Judy's request that she and Joseph begin paying rent for the trailer and the land they had been living on rent-free for over a year. When detectives asked why she had chosen to kill her entire family, Michelle's response was chilling. She said she was tired of everybody stepping on her and had decided that if her grievances were not resolved by December 24th, her plan was to eliminate them all. When pressed about the murders of Erica and the children, Michelle stated that she didn't want them living with the memory of what had happened and didn't want any witnesses. Joseph later told investigators that he had been the one to kill the children, explaining that Michelle had instructed him to do so because she could not bring herself to do it personally. They both repeated the claim that they did not want Olivia and Nathan to grow up with the trauma of witnessing their parents' deaths. With the confessions and the details of their motive established, the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office formally charged Michelle Anderson and Joseph McEnroe on December 28, 2007, with 6 counts each of aggravated first-degree murder with a firearm. Despite their admissions, the legal process was slow and costly, dragging on for years. 10 months after the killings, in October 2008, the prosecutor announced he would seek the death penalty for both defendants. He cited the magnitude of the crimes, the murders spanning 3 generations, and the killing of 2 young children as factors that justified capital punishment. But this stance met resistance. The judge ruled against pursuing the death penalty, and the Washington governor later declared that no executions would take place while he was in office. Around this time, Michelle herself stated publicly that she wished to be executed. She described the decision as the hardest she had ever made, but one she felt was necessary to take responsibility for her actions. Years later, on September 5, 2013, the Washington State Supreme Court overturned the judge's ruling, reinstating the possibility of capital punishment. The prospect of execution appeared to change Michelle's stance. She withdrew her earlier statements and, with a new legal team in place, shifted her approach. Ultimately, both Michelle Anderson and Joseph McEnroe would be tried separately, nearly 7.5 years after the Christmas Eve massacre. Joseph McEnroe's trial began in January 2015. His defense team presented him as a man coerced into murder by his then-girlfriend, Michelle Anderson. According to the defense, it was Michelle who had harbored the desire to see her family dead, and Joseph was merely a tool in carrying out her plan. Jurors listened to a recorded interview in which Michelle herself told a King County Sheriff's detective that the murders had been her idea from the very beginning. On the tape, she admitted that she had pushed Joseph into it, accepting full responsibility and saying she should have walked away. Joseph's attorneys argued that Michelle had molded him into what they called her attack dog, manipulating him from every possible angle until he agreed to kill. They claimed his mental health struggles, coupled with a fragile emotional state, had made him especially vulnerable to her influence. In court, Joseph's background was also brought under scrutiny. His aunt, Mary Turner, testified about his turbulent childhood, describing a mother who was both financially unstable and emotionally volatile. She alleged that Joseph had been beaten, verbally abused, and used as leverage in her attempts to extract money from her own parents. When testifying in his own defense, Joseph claimed that his decision to kill Olivia and Nathan Anderson was, in his view, a twisted act of mercy. Ending their lives, he insisted, was the only way to free them. He described their deaths as quick and painless, a statement that left the courtroom visibly shaken. On March 25, 2015, after weeks of testimony, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all 6 counts of aggravated first-degree murder, along with the associated firearm enhancements. Joseph's demeanor on the stand was peculiar. He appeared heavily medicated, often pausing, sighing, or struggling to find words. At moments, he seemed on the verge of tears. He admitted that thoughts of the murders haunted him constantly, lingering in his mind every day since that night. However, the senior deputy prosecutor accused Joseph of deliberately altering his behavior, even modifying his speech patterns and appearance, in a calculated attempt to draw sympathy from the jury. Joseph, for his part, expressed remorse, claiming he had taken the lives of people who had shown him nothing but kindness. He told the court that if there were any way to undo what he had done, to bring them back or ease the pain he had caused, he would do it without hesitation. During closing arguments, the prosecution urged the jury to impose the ultimate penalty, death. Addressing the panel, the senior deputy prosecutor told them that the punishment was both just and necessary. But the jurors could not reach a unanimous decision. 8 voted in favor of execution, while 4 opposed it. Without unanimity, Washington law required the court to impose the only remaining option: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. On May 13, 2015, Joseph McEnroe was formally sentenced, ensuring he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. 8 years after the murders, Michelle Anderson finally faced trial. Her proceedings began in January 2016, but the death penalty, initially a possibility, was taken off the table. The prosecutor explained that after 2 separate juries in recent capital cases, including McEnroe's, had declined to impose death sentences, it was no longer in the interest of justice to pursue it against Michelle. Given that she was considered equally culpable, her potential punishment would be aligned with Joseph's: life without parole. Throughout the trial, Michelle's demeanor fluctuated. At times she sat with her head lowered, appearing tearful, but she chose not to speak to the court directly. Her defense attorney claimed Michelle was deeply remorseful and had apologized to everyone affected. The prosecutor took a very different position, describing her motive as pure, unadulterated greed. In her first police interview, he noted, she had mentioned money over 35 times while explaining why she killed her family. Jurors heard recordings from that interview in which Michelle contradicted herself repeatedly. She shifted from calling herself a monster for killing her family to claiming her parents and brother had abused her for years. No credible evidence was ever presented to support her abuse allegations. In reality, those who knew Wayne, Judy, and Scott described them as warm, compassionate people. Erica and her children were equally blameless. Testimony revealed that Michelle harbored deep animosity toward Erica, believing she had driven a wedge between Michelle and Scott. Michelle's defense team called no witnesses. They cited years of difficulty working with her, noting her refusal to cooperate or even communicate with them. The courtroom, however, heard from the victim's family members. Erica's mother addressed Michelle directly, recalling that after being shot, Erica still managed to call 911, not just for herself, but to try to save her children. Michelle's sister, Mary Anderson, also spoke. Her voice heavy with grief, she told Michelle that she would have the rest of her life in prison to reflect on her actions. The judge commended the resilience of the secondary victims, family members, friends, first responders, and jurors, who had endured gruesome testimony and graphic crime scene images. He acknowledged their suffering, saying, "Even though you didn't do anything wrong, it's still your fault. You've all suffered tremendous losses. Fortunately, this lengthy chapter of your nightmare is almost over." As the proceedings drew to a close, Michelle erupted, shouting at the judge and accusing her court-appointed attorneys of lying to her. She said she wanted to leave jail temporarily to hire private counsel, but her request was denied. She placed blame squarely on the judge, claiming he was violating her rights. On March 4, 2016, Michelle Anderson was convicted of 6 counts of aggravated first-degree murder. On April 21st, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, matching the fate of her former boyfriend and co-defendant. With both trials concluded, the Anderson family finally saw justice served, though it came 8 years after the murders. The precise motive behind Michelle's actions may never be known, whether it was greed, jealousy, rage, or a combination of all three. What is certain is that two people bound by a toxic relationship destroyed 3 generations in a single night. Perhaps Michelle could not stand to see the happiness Scott had found with Erica, or the close-knit family they had built together. As for Joseph, his participation remains one of the case's most disturbing mysteries. With no clear personal motive, he still chose to take part, and even carried out the murders of the children. The tragedy remains devastating. Today, Joseph McEnroe serves his sentence at Washington State Penitentiary. Michelle Anderson is held at the Washington Correction Center for Women. Neither will ever be released. And while justice was served in the legal sense, the wounds left by the Carnation murders will never fully heal. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. It was a quiet evening in Riverside, California, just another night in a peaceful neighborhood. Justin Hilbert kissed his son goodnight, said goodbye to his partner Tanya, and walked out the door. But something was waiting for him outside, a plan in motion that would end his life in the blink of an eye. As hours passed and Justin failed to return, Tanya's worry turned to fear. A message sent from his phone was the only sign she had. 2 chilling words: "It's over." If you're a fan of true crime and criminal investigations, you won't want to miss our new book, The Ultimate Book of Serial Killers: 180 Files of the World's Most Notorious Murderers, now available on Amazon. You can also purchase the PDF version directly from our website for instant download. You'll find the link in the video description and in a pinned comment. Now, let's dive into today's case. Tanya Rep was born in the mid-1980s in California. She grew up in a stable, hard-working household, and from an early age, she displayed a sense of independence, responsibility, and a strong ambition to carve her own path. Tanya pursued a career in logistics, where she earned a reputation for her organizational skills and unwavering reliability. Her professional life was characterized by a deep sense of commitment, and it was clear that she had a bright future ahead of her. In the 2000s, Tanya met Jared Bischoff, a former U.S. Marine. Jared seemed like the ideal partner: mature, dependable, and strong. Their relationship moved quickly, and it wasn't long before they were married. At first, things seemed promising, but soon cracks began to appear in their marriage. As time passed, tensions between them grew, and power struggles became more frequent. Jared's behavior became increasingly controlling and aggressive, his jealousy and emotional manipulation taking a toll on Tanya. Eventually, his physical aggression escalated, but Tanya refused to accept such treatment. Determined to reclaim her life, Tanya began gathering evidence in preparation for a divorce. The process was long and painful. Jared, however, was unwilling to let go. He resisted the separation and fought to maintain control over her, using any means necessary to keep her in his grasp. His obsession with maintaining influence over her life persisted even after their divorce. Tanya's attempt to move on was met with constant interference from Jared. Though he claimed to have come to terms with their split, he couldn't bear the idea of Tanya being with someone else. Jared's behavior intensified when Tanya began seeing another man. He tried to convince himself that he had accepted the situation, but his actions told a different story. He showed up near her home, monitored her every move, and made threats to keep her in check. In contrast, Tanya's new partner, Justin Hilbert, lived a quiet, steady life. Born in 1988, Justin had grown up in Riverside, California, and after a series of side gigs, he found stability in a full-time job maintaining industrial equipment. He was calm, reserved, and conflict-averse, with a desire to build a simple, steady life. In early 2015, he met Tanya, who was still dealing with the aftermath of her tumultuous marriage. Their connection was natural, and Justin didn't push for anything too fast. He simply offered support, quietly being there for her when she needed him. Over time, their bond grew, and they became a couple. By the time Tanya found out she was pregnant, their relationship had become solid. Justin was undeterred by the news. Instead, he embraced it with calm resolve. The two settled into a life together, preparing for the arrival of their child. Early in 2016, their son, Logan, was born. Justin immediately stepped into fatherhood, eager to learn how to care for his son, swaddling, bottle feeding, and waking up for late-night feedings. Meanwhile, there was Bailey Sharp, the youngest person in this story. Bailey, born in the early 1990s in Seattle, came from a law enforcement family and had a bright future ahead of her. However, everything changed in her teens when she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and lupus. Chronic pain, medical restrictions, and the toll on her mental health led her down a difficult path. She began using marijuana, then turned to prescription painkillers, and eventually stronger substances. After several stints in rehab and periods of recovery, Bailey decided to leave Seattle in search of a fresh start in California. By 2015, she had few social ties left, and her family relationships had deteriorated. In California, she struggled with unstable housing and finding steady work. It was in this vulnerable state that she met Jared Bischoff. Jared's involvement in Bailey's life was not about romance, but about exerting dominance and control. He saw her vulnerability as an opportunity to manipulate and influence her for his own purposes. On June 20th, 2016, everything changed. It was an ordinary day in Riverside, California. Tanya, Justin, and their 6-month-old son, Logan, spent the day together, discussing their weekly plans and enjoying their time as a family. But things took an unexpected turn when Tanya received a strange message from a woman named Bailey Sharp. The message accused Justin of living a double life and being dishonest. Tanya showed Justin the message, and he immediately dismissed it as false, assuring her that someone was trying to drive a wedge between them. Calm but firm, Justin reassured Tanya that he loved her and had nothing to hide. He promised to get to the bottom of who was behind the accusation. Later that evening, Justin left the house. It was not unusual for him to run errands or pick up tools, and Tanya thought little of it. However, hours passed, and Justin did not return. Tanya tried calling and texting him, but there was no response. By midnight, his phone was turned off. Worry set in, and Tanya stayed up, hoping to hear from him. But as the night wore on, she was left in the dark, unsure of where he was or what had happened. On the morning of June 21, 2016, Tanya received a chilling text message from Justin's phone, one that seemed out of place, short and impersonal. "Don't wait. It's over." There was no greeting, no explanation, just cold words that felt foreign. It was not how Justin spoke. Tanya immediately sensed something was terribly wrong. She texted his mother and called his sister, hoping for any word on Justin's whereabouts, but no one knew where he was. It became clear that Justin was missing. Around the same time, Riverside County authorities received a report from a man on a motorcycle who was riding down a rural road near Lake Matthews. The man spotted a body lying face up on the shoulder, clothes soaked in blood. There were no signs of a struggle. The medical examiner later confirmed that the man was Justin and had died from a gunshot to the head, but there were knife wounds before the fatal shot. Evidence suggested that Justin had been attacked elsewhere before being dumped in that spot. Investigators began their work immediately. Based on the condition of the body, they believed the crime had occurred the night before. After confirming Justin's identity, officers went to the home he shared with Tanya. She confirmed that Justin had left around 9 p.m. the previous night and never returned. His car, a dark blue sedan, was also missing, and it was quickly entered into the National Missing Vehicle Database. As investigators continued to process the scene, they noted that several of Justin's personal items were missing, including his phone, work badge, and wallet. He never left without them, which suggested that someone had deliberately tried to erase any trace of him. But tiny fibers and microparticles on Justin's body pointed to a different location. Subsequent investigation confirmed that Justin had been transported and discarded after his death. Speaking with Justin's friends and co-workers provided no concrete leads. No one knew of any conflict or threats against him. All who knew him described him as calm and non-confrontational, with no debts or legal issues. There was no obvious motive for his murder. However, the case took a turn when investigators examined Tanya's recent messages. One name stood out: Bailey Sharp. Bailey had contacted Tanya just before Justin's disappearance, and a record search revealed that Bailey had no fixed address, a criminal history related to illegal substances, and a history of instability. This led authorities to focus on her as a primary lead. They traced Bailey's movements and found that she had no official job, no insurance, no vehicle, and no driver's license. The only connection they had was the phone number she used to contact Tanya. A request to the phone carrier revealed that the SIM card was registered under someone else's name and used sporadically. Further investigation into the phone number revealed frequent connections to a man named Jared Bischoff, Tanya's ex-husband. Although this didn't provide concrete evidence of collaboration between Bailey and Jared, it raised suspicions. As the investigation continued, authorities began tracking Bailey's associates. Social workers reported seeing her in parking lots and bars with various men, but the identities of these individuals remained unknown. The focus shifted to digital records. A check of the IP address Bailey used to log into her social media accounts revealed that the same device and IP address had been used to access an account associated with Jared Bischoff. The connection between Bailey and Jared became increasingly clear, though the exact nature of their relationship was still uncertain. Investigators couldn't rule out the possibility that Jared didn't know about the messages sent from Bailey's phone, but everything pointed to a coordinated effort. They decided to continue surveillance on Bailey and Jared, tracking their movements without alerting the suspects. It wasn't until later that investigators discovered the most chilling detail. The text Tanya received from Justin's phone that morning was not sent by Justin at all. By that time, Justin had already been killed. His phone was in Bailey's possession. She had deliberately sent the message, intending to buy time and keep Tanya from contacting authorities too soon. Once law enforcement began actively searching for Bailey Sharp, they quickly realized that her whereabouts were elusive. Her phone was turned off, and there was no activity on her social media or messaging accounts. The only lead came from surveillance footage at a pharmacy. On the evening of June 22nd, roughly 24 hours after Justin's body was discovered, Bailey was caught on camera. She was alone, wearing a medical mask and a hooded sweatshirt. Bailey bought pain relievers and bottled water. When she paid at the counter, she presented an ID that did not match her own name. The clerk didn't remember many details, but the cameras captured everything. After that, Bailey disappeared again. As a result, Bailey was officially declared a wanted person. An alert was quickly sent out across local law enforcement agencies, and her photo, known aliases, descriptions, and connections were entered into the system. As investigators dug deeper, they noticed a pattern. In the weeks leading up to Justin's death, Bailey had been spotted several times in southern Riverside, particularly near a remote residential complex. Surveillance footage in the area showed her vehicle, followed by another car registered under a man's name. At this point, authorities had yet to release the name, but it was becoming increasingly clear. Either Bailey was aware that law enforcement was searching for her, or someone was helping her stay hidden. But then a bigger question remained. If Bailey was just a pawn in this case, who was really pulling the strings? Who had planned this entire scheme? The answer began to take shape on the morning of June 24th, when the Department of Motor Vehicles responded to an inquiry about a second vehicle frequently seen near Bailey. This car was registered to none other than Jared Bischoff, Tanya's ex-husband. Until that moment, police had no reason to believe Jared was involved in Justin's disappearance. But now, with his vehicle appearing near the main suspect, Bailey, the investigation took a sharp turn. After his divorce from Tanya, Jared had stayed with relatives briefly before moving out. According to Tanya's close friends, communication between them had ceased after several arguments, controlling behavior, and emotional tension. Tanya believed Jared was dangerous, though there were no official police reports filed against him. Investigators learned that Tanya had once discussed installing a security system because she feared her ex-husband. After their split, Jared seemed to disappear from the radar. No one knew exactly where he was living or who he was spending time with. That is, until Bailey re-entered the picture. Investigators learned that Bailey had been frequenting southern Riverside for several weeks before Justin's death. Surveillance footage showed her with a man whose face was partially visible but bore a striking resemblance to Jared. The connection was soon confirmed. With this new information, police secured a warrant to search an apartment Jared appeared to be using based on the mobile activity. The apartment was rented under a false name. Inside, the scene was chaotic. Leftover food, Bailey's clothing, a backpack, and a knife wrapped in a t-shirt. Forensic tests later revealed that the blade contained traces of blood, which was confirmed to belong to Justin Hilbert. However, Jared was no longer there. Witnesses reported seeing him shortly before the incident, sometimes alone and sometimes with a woman resembling Bailey. After that, both Jared and Bailey vanished. With warrants now issued for both suspects, the investigation expanded to include banks, phone carriers, and traffic cameras. A bartender named Ricky remembered Bailey clearly. She had been there with a man, tall, with an upright posture, and quiet. At the time, he hadn't known the man's name, but when shown a photo of Jared, Ricky immediately recognized him. Ricky recalled overhearing parts of their conversation, including phrases like, "She ruined everything," and "He won't be around much longer." This provided a potential motive. Jared wanted Justin out of the picture to regain control over Tanya. It seemed that the original target may have been Tanya, but Justin's involvement had set the entire plan in motion. Using Bailey, Jared had orchestrated a setup. She sent Tanya misleading messages accusing Justin of infidelity, hoping to sow doubt and create conflict. The goal was to drive a wedge between them, possibly pushing Justin away from Tanya. On the evening of June 20th, Justin left the house after receiving those messages from Bailey. He was lured into a confrontation with someone he thought he could trust, unaware he was walking straight into a trap. Tragically, no one would see him alive again. Days later, investigators discovered Justin's car, a dark blue sedan, abandoned on a remote roadside. Inside the car were bloodstains on the seat and a partial fingerprint on the exterior, further evidence that something terrible had occurred. Each new discovery raised more questions. The investigation took a crucial turn when authorities linked a sub-analysis to Danny Serrano, a man with prior convictions for assault and theft. At the time, Danny was already in custody on an unrelated charge. However, it was confirmed that during Justin's disappearance, Danny had still been free. Investigators interviewed him while he was in the detention center, but his statements were inconsistent. He denied involvement, though his responses raised suspicions. The police then brought Danny's photo to bartender Ricky, who had previously seen Bailey Sharp at a bar. When Ricky saw Danny's image, he immediately recognized him. Ricky recalled seeing Bailey with another man who was nervous and edgy, Danny. He remembered that Danny hadn't been drinking much, had changed clothes in the restroom, and had thrown something in the trash. Before leaving, Danny reportedly told Ricky, "You didn't see anything. That's why you're still breathing." At the time, Ricky had dismissed the comment as a joke, but in hindsight, he realized he had encountered someone directly tied to the case. Ricky's account added weight to investigators' suspicions. There was a third person involved. Justin's phone was discovered in a dumpster near where his car had been abandoned. Though the phone was damaged, forensic specialists managed to recover the call logs and text history. The text confirmed that in the final hours of Justin's life, he received messages from Bailey's phone and a subsequent phone call that prompted him to leave home. This new evidence helped reconstruct the chain of events leading up to his murder. Meanwhile, a small motel in Arizona caught the attention of investigators. In early July, a man and woman matching the descriptions of Jared and Bailey had stayed there. The motel manager recalled that they had been quiet, paid in cash, and requested not to be disturbed. After their departure, the manager mentioned that the shower had been scrubbed thoroughly, but micro traces of blood were found in the drain. On July 23rd, in a remote desert area near an abandoned hangar, the body of a woman was discovered. The woman was later identified as Bailey Sharp. The cause of death was determined to be multiple stab wounds, but there were no belongings, ID, or phone found with her. Moreover, fingerprints belonging to Jared were discovered on a plastic bag near the dump site where Bailey's body was found. After their stay at the motel, it became clear that Bailey had been eliminated. Jared had ensured that there would be no loose ends to tie him to the crime. With mounting evidence against him, authorities were certain that Jared had removed a partner who might have turned on him, making him the sole suspect in both murders. On July 27th, a tip came in from a roadside diner in Arizona. A man resembling Jared had eaten alone, paid in cash, and left. Surveillance footage confirmed it was him. 3 days later, on July 30th, in New Mexico, a patrol unit stopped a car with a broken tail light. The driver, visibly nervous and carrying fake identification, was later confirmed to be Jared Bischoff. He was arrested. When authorities searched his vehicle, they found only cash, forged documents, and a backpack with clothes. Jared remained calm and silent during questioning, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. Blood traces matching Bailey's were found in the motel, and the apartment linked to him contained a knife with Justin's blood on it. Forensic experts confirmed that the blood on the knife matched blood found in Justin's car where the crime had occurred. Moreover, Jared's DNA was found on the steering wheel and driver's seat of the vehicle, confirming he had driven the car after the murder. The final breakthrough came with Danny Serrano's confession. During a second interview, fearing a life sentence, Danny agreed to cooperate. He revealed that Jared had been the one to use the knife and fire the fatal shot. Danny admitted he had helped restrain Justin and later helped dispose of the body. His story aligned with digital evidence, physical findings, and the established timeline. Investigators also discovered that some of the messages sent to Tanya from Bailey's phone had been written by a man. Forensic linguists confirmed that these texts had been crafted by Jared, confirming what the data had suggested all along. Bailey and Jared had acted in coordination, with Jared as the mastermind and direct perpetrator behind the crime. In the spring of 2017, the trial began. The charges included first-degree murder of Justin Hilbert, the death of Bailey Sharp, conspiracy, and destruction of evidence. The jury found Jared Bischoff guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 2 life terms without the possibility of parole, and his attorney declined to file an appeal. Initially, Jared had planned to target both Tanya and Justin, but according to Danny, the plan evolved. Jared allegedly said that physical death was too quick for his ex-wife. He believed that the real suffering would come from leaving her alive, forcing her to face a life without the person she loved. Jared wanted Tanya to endure the pain of raising her child while constantly reminded of the horrors that had unfolded. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.